the more subject to outside forces they felt they were. Whereas someone who was still doing a job they were sort of supposed to do a certain job, they would try to do the job. Even though maybe they subliminally knew that they'd be cut off from people with vested interests higher up. But still they would try to do something, and they would feel like they could try, they could write this in, or put this piece of thing in. So, you know, the meek shall inherit the earth has maybe a more subtle meaning. You know, that delusion magnified by greater means and wealth is harder for that person to get rid of in a certain way. Whereas when someone is really trying to deal with what's immediately in front of them, then delusion becomes something they can't afford. So they try to be more realistic. And therefore they try to be more hopeful. If you're realistic, you'll be truly hopeful. Because not being hopeful makes it harder to do whatever you're doing. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, you know, predicting doom, you know. And as the Dalai Lama says, you know, and he should know because he's been dealing with the ultimate hopeless lost cause situation as far as most people think. I agree with him. I don't think it's hopeless. He doesn't think it's hopeless, but most people do, even most Tibetans, even though they're respecting him, okay, it isn't hopeless, but they all think so. Because everybody thinks China is hopeless, you can't do anything about big giant China. They don't see that China is actually a drunken giant that is like stumbling around in a swamp. And, you know, it could destroy everything or itself, you know, but it isn't really some sort of thing. And, you know, Tibet, the story of Tibet is far from over. But anyway, he's been, you could excuse him emotionally for feeling hopeless about his responsibility as the leader of Tibet, trying to save his people and his country. Not to mention, as the Bodhisattva of compassion, worrying about the fate of the earth and of all the beings on the earth, seeing all the species extinguished and so many atrocities and holocausts and millions of people being killed here and there by this and that stupidity. And so, but he always says, well, you do everything you can do about something. And then one thing you can do when you can't do any more is you can keep insisting on imagining a positive outcome. And cleaving to the fact that, yes, this person could change their mind, or I'm never going to give in to that, they never will change their behavior or their mind, or this situation will never change. I won't give in to that, which leads to despair. Yes, they could change, you know. And then even if you lose, you know, and you're wrong, your positive imagination proves wrong in the case, you will feel as you sink on the ship that you even did everything you could do mentally to try to save the situation. Whereas if you give up ahead of time, then you haven't done everything you could do, because you didn't project the mind pattern of something working out. You know? Now the Dalai Lama's job is much harder, because the Dalai Lama only has 6 million people against 1.3 billion Chinese, although really all the Chinese don't want to be in Tibet, they don't want to own Tibet. There's 9 members of the Standing Committee of the Chinese Politburo who are stubbornly enacting the policies of Deng Xiaoping and Mao Zedong. That they absolutely, and some military people who have businesses extracting things from Tibet who think they must have Tibet. Otherwise, they don't really need Tibet. They never had Tibet. They never wanted Tibet. They can't live there. It's 3 miles high. It is just useless. They can buy the minerals cheaper than stationing the whole army and fortifying the border and the whole nonsense that they're doing. You know, imperialism doesn't work. It's too expensive. It's not cost effective in the modern. Of course, there's kind of economic imperialism. People do. But then they would try to drive a hard bargain to buy the copper or the iron or the uranium or the wood or whatever they were getting. But the expense of the army and everything is a bottom line loss to the Chinese. That's why people don't do empires anymore. So therefore, the Dalai Lama's majority is the 6 billion people on Earth, who may come to realize that Tibet is, you know, what Tibet really is the triumph of peacefulness, of nonviolence, the sort of human heart, the positive vision of the human heart. Shangri-La in the sense of Shambhala in the sense of the positive vision of a nonviolent life as being the real way of living. And he has to mobilize 6 billion people to realize that what 9 members of the Politburo are marshalling like a 5 million or 10 million person army, who themselves are having their hands full controlling 1.3 billion or 1.2 billion poor Chinese, or more, 2.5 billion poor Chinese. So they're already having a real hands full controlling them and keeping them down while the Communist Party oligarchy gets rich. And at the same time, they're trying to control Tibet. But anyway, so that's the whole world saying by the heart. And the Chinese people, by their heart, they want to see a happy, free Tibet. They have a Shangri-La fantasy themselves, as their land is polluted and everything is poisoned, and they have to work 20 hours a day, 10 days a week. It's just horrible what they are being put through. You know, they call it eating bitterness. You know, when they recruit people to their factories, they say you have to be ready to eat bitterness. You know, but you will get rich someday, somehow, which is, of course, an illusion. They're slaves. And so the heart of the world has to, Tibet, nobody's going to invade and push the Chinese out. That never happened. So it's only the heart of the world willing Tibet to be free and to be restored to being a beacon of love and compassion, hope. That is what that's the Dalai Lama's troops, you know, of people. And those troops can't even prevail against their own governments now. Like, those troops marched against the Iraq invasion by the tens of thousands, maybe 1 million people. And probably 10 million wanted to march but were scared, or maybe 20. And only 10 or 20 fanatics think bombing Baghdad will bring Jesus in the rapture. And probably not really all of them, just a few loonies in each family. Most of the family members think the loony who's really into it is like stupid. And they'd rather watch Mickey Mouse, you know. And so, but we can't control this run-amok government that we have because the democracy isn't working in the current thing right now. So those troops are troops who like, come on, man, like relax. Enjoy being in the White House. Have a drink on the porch. You don't need to invade Iraq. You don't need to Darth Cheney. Just like tune up your pacemaker and take a break. You don't need all the oil in the universe, and it is not necessary. You don't need to kill all the Arabs. Just relax. Let them pay them a price for their oil and let them relax. Such a tragedy, because the Islamic world, what we need is for the Islamic women to assert themselves. And even in spite of Saddam Hussein, Iraq was a more secular Islamic country, and the women were doctors and lawyers, and they were powerful. They were a little more, not enough, but they were a bit more powerful in that positive economy, in spite of the horrible dictator that we put on there anyway. We hired him initially in the 50s to kill all the socialists, the Iraqi socialists after the war, thinking that they would go commie or something. And so, in fact, that set them back. But now the poor women are really back in it, you know, because the fundamentalists and extremists have taken over because of our stupid presence there. It's just tragic. But in a way, it's a sign of hope that it's so tragic. Because the fact that the leadership that are thinking that this world is 100 years ago, or maybe 500 years ago, the fact that they're so incompetent and so desperate in their acts and behaviors and completely fantasizing these completely unrealistic things indicates that they really lost their traction. You know, they're not really mobilizing everybody to march against the Germans or march against whoever it has been, you know, over the last couple of centuries, you know. People don't really want to as a whole, you know. But they're there, you know, the Putin, the Bushes, the Chinese Politburo, they're still reinforcing each other. I think they almost know by now that their only friends are each other. And they have to keep, each one has to keep their own population enthralled with fear. And that means that they're really at the end game. They can't really maintain that for much longer. They might kill a few more of us, lots of us, but ultimately they can't. You know, that's my final slogan anyway. That's my last slogan. I like to say at the end of my Book of the Dead thing. Our duty is to be so hopeful and so happy that even if they kill us, we will die happy.